Multiple Layer Inlay Stencils, or MLISs, are used to create intricate inlay designs into your woodworking projects with ease and precision. Each stencil design comes with its own particular number of plates that, when used properly, you can create some beautiful, eye-popping artwork to integrate into your woodworking projects, new or old. The plates are numbered in numerical order so you know the order in which to use your plates. On each plate, you will also see an engraved image of your inlay with parts of the plate missing. This is where you will use your router with an installed inlay kit to cut out both the inlay pieces and the pocket in which they will be placed. To better illustrate, let's take a more in-depth look at the inlay process using a multiple layer inlay stencil. Today we will be creating a simple name inlay for a cedar toy box project. You will need the following tools: an orbital sander with assorted sandpaper discs, double-sided tape, X-Acto knives, a putty knife, scissors, a dead blow hammer, a wood glue and a brush to spread it with, a router with the inlay kit installed, and of course an MLIS stencil. To create the design using an MLIS, you will first need to cut out the inlay pieces. To do this, first gather the tools and materials you will need for the project. Use the stencils to plan what wood you will use. We like to use double-sided tape to hold our project board in place on a piece of insulation foam board from a local home improvement store. Be sure to place tape underneath where you will intend to cut out your inlay when cutting all the way through the wood, as we will be. Place your first stencil on your project board to cut out the first piece to use in your inlay. Using a router with an installed inlay kit, set the depth to the thickness of your project wood. Then, using your fine depth adjustment, increase the plunge depth to ensure you cut all the way through your wood. Right now, ensure that the washer from your inlay kit is not installed. Place your router inside the stencil cutout and hold it in place firmly against the side of the stencil. Trace in a clockwise direction along the cutout, being sure to keep a steady, controlled pace. While moving the router along the stencil, keep pressure slightly down and against the stencil wall, being certain to keep the router level on the surface when approaching the fall-off edge. Mark the tops of each piece with the necessary marking to remember placement and direction. Keep in mind that if there is a thin wall on your stencil that could bend with light pressure, you might want to use another stencil or positioning block to keep that wall from moving. Also, we recommend cutting out all the inlay pieces before moving on to the next step. After all of our inlay pieces are cut, we're ready to tape down our project boards and decide on the placement of our inlay. But first, let's place our pieces inside of our plates for safekeeping. After all of your inlay pieces are cut, we're ready to tape down our project boards and decide on the placement of our inlay. To help us with this, we recommend using our positioning kits. They not only give us square surface to hold our plates in place as we move through the inlay process, but they are also the same thickness as all of our inlay stencils, making it easy to keep the router level when cutting out the inlay pockets. And when used with our double-sided tape, there are no clamps to work around on our project surface. Once you've decided on your inlay placement using the stencils, place the positioning plate against the top and trace the edge with a pencil. Tape the plate in place along the pencil line. Square up the small blocking plate with the left or right edge of your designed stencils. Place blocks firmly together to ensure squareness. After your blocking kit is in place, you are ready to tape down your stencils against your blocking kit, keeping them tight together for a precise placement on each layer of the MLIS. Right now, be sure to replace the washer that you removed from your inlay kit when doing the cutouts before moving forward. You are now ready to create your inlay pockets. Set the depth of your plunge to slightly smaller than the thickness of your thinnest inlay piece. When we create the pocket, we want to leave no more than 1/16 of an inch sticking out of the top of the wood surface. But we need at least 1/32 of an inch sticking out, so that we could sand it flat with the surface later. With the washer replaced onto the inlay kit, route out the pockets by moving in a clockwise direction, the same as we did with the cutouts. After each pocket is traced in each stencil's first layer, pause for a moment to remove any tape from the pockets that could get caught up in the router. Then proceed routing out each pocket, moving in a back and forth linear pattern until all wood is removed from the pocket. Once the pocket is cut, remove your layer 1 stencils using a flexible putty knife to pop them up from the wood surface. Prepare your pocket for insertion by cleaning up the floor of your pocket using a putty knife or, if necessary, a wood chisel. Then use a more precise X-Acto knife to clean up the pocket walls. We are now ready to prepare our inlay pieces for insertion into our clean pockets. To make for an easy to insert sure fit, flip your inlay piece over and sand an angle or a rounded edge onto the back side of each piece. For the best looking inlay, be sure to very lightly sand any edges that are not completely smooth. Dry fit each piece into its pocket, and you should feel a snug fit and it should not fall without pressure. This is where you get to see how your cuts were. Do not try to insert the piece all the way at this time because you may not get it back out. Set your pieces to the side until you've sanded all your pieces for layer 1 of your inlay. You are now ready to glue them in place. During the glue-in process, it's recommended that you only try to glue and insert one piece at a time before gluing any other pockets in case problems arise during inlay insertion. Use a glue brush to apply your desired wood glue in and against the walls of your pockets. Also apply a coat of glue on the back of the inlay piece. When inserting the piece into the pocket, align it and try to press it in evenly with your hand. Use a wood block and a dead blow hammer to fully set the inlay piece in the pocket. Wipe away any wood glue that squeezes out and sand the top of your inlay piece to create dust. Push the dust tightly up against the inlay edge and use a putty knife to press dust glue mixture around all edges of the inlay piece. Inspect for cracks between the wood joints afterwards. You may need to add glue or repeat the dust creation process a few times to ensure that the crack is filled with enough dust to blend seamlessly with the wood. Repeat the process with every piece in the first layer. Once all pieces are in and you're confident that there are no small gaps without any dust glue mixture, place a heavy weight on top of it. For best results without risking the quality of your inlay, it's recommended that you give the inlay 8 hours to dry before moving on. After allowing for enough time for the glue to set up, it's time to use your orbiter sander and sand the project smooth enough so that we could tape down the next layer of stencils in our design. Start by using 80 grit sandpaper to work it down until you get close to the surface if necessary. Then switch to 120 grit to bring it fairly even with the project surface so that we can tape down our next stencil. For best results from your sander, practice patience and apply little to no pressure to your orbital sander while keeping it as level as possible with the surface. This also prevents gouges in your work and saves time later. We are now ready to tape down stencil layer 2 into place and repeat the inlay process we performed already on the first layer. Continue with this process until you have worked through every layer in your MLIS design. As you move through the layers, you can see your design begin to take form. Always make sure your stencils are lined up properly as you go through this process by aligning the engraving on your stencil with the inlay pieces you have already inserted. After sanding your final inlay piece to the surface, remove your blocking kit and prepare for final sanding. When sanding the final layer, work evenly across the whole piece with 120 grit sandpaper and finishing with 220 grit. When you create a wood inlay using an MLIS, the results speak for themselves. From all of us here at Tarter Woodworking, thank you for taking the time to learn more about the wood inlay process using a multiple layer inlay stencil. Only available at tarterwoodworking.com, where we are always growing to offer you the best in wood inlay design. Happy woodworking.